series has sold more than 300,000 copies and has changed the way women do prayer groups. Stay with us today on Deeper Living. Our special guest is Neta Jackson, author of the Yada Yada Prayer Group series.
From coast to coast across North America, this is Deeper Living, bringing the inspirational marketplace to your front door. We exist to bring you the latest and greatest from authors, artists, and artisans around the world. You're going to love this.
Welcome to Deeper Living. I'm Ginger Garrett, and I'm joined today with Merit eBook, and our special guest is Neta Jackson, author of the best-selling Yada Yada Prayer Group series. Now, Neta, the first question is, what does yada yada mean?
Well, actually, it's a Hebrew word that's found in Scripture 944 times. And yeah, that's
apparently we're not reading it right there.
Well, we're not reading in Hebrew.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. Yeah, that was a surprise to me too, because you hear people say, you know, oh, yada yada, whatever,
right.
You know. But I'd heard this dance group called Yada Yada, and I thought, what does that mean? You know, I knew it meant had to mean something, and it's a Hebrew word in Scripture meaning to sing, to give praise to God. You know, well, while I was looking it up, there was Yada right above it. You know, and I thought, that's interesting, because you just hear it kind of out on the street.
Right.
And I was just blown away, because it means to know and be known intimately. And that's a root word, and it has all kinds of subtle shades of meaning, you know, like Adam knew his wife, you know, that kind of intimacy.
Right.
But also in Psalm 139, which I call the Yada Psalm, because the word yada in Hebrew appears several times in there, is all about how intimately God knows us. Wow. And so I thought that would be a great name for a prayer group, you know, to know and be known intimately with each other, but also, you know, with God. And so that's how the title was born.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because like you said, it is sort of that phrase, and when you put the meaning behind it, I think then it sort of takes sort of the whole story and kind of transcends that, because women do get together, and there are your best friends that you know each other, and sort of gives a little more insight into exactly what we might be reading about in your novel.
And what's funny is in the first novel, this is the first one, the prayer group couldn't think of a name. And somebody, you know, why do we need a name? You know, just yada yada, whatever, pick a name, you know. And somebody says, well, let's just call it yada yada, you know. So they ignorantly called it yada yada. And then, because they had a Jewish Christian as part of the group, she says, I think that means something, and she explores and discovers. So they discover this, you know, the meaning of the name. So
now, these characters, they're so real to the readers, and they've lived with them now through 7 books, is it?
Well, 6 are out. This is the 6th one, but there is a 7th one coming out this fall. And
it's based, is it not, on an experience? The series was born out of a prayer group you were a part in, but it is a fictional series.
That's true. The idea for the story was inspired by my prayer group.
Yeah. Can we find your prayer group in here? Did you characterize anyone?
Actually, some of the characters were inspired by people, you know, and we had such a mix of people, and I wanted that same kind of mix in the novel, and like a Jewish Christian and a brand new person off the street who, you know, really wasn't sure about this Jesus stuff and refused to bring her Bible to the Bible study, you know, things like that, because the real group had really turned my life upside down, or right side up, I say, because walking by faith with this group of women had just so deepened my faith. I felt like I had a broad, you know, I was raised in a Christian home. I had such a broad faith, but it was about that deep, you know.
Right.
But to walk with women who grew up in entirely different situations and cultural milieus than I did, and had a lot more struggles in different ways, and just to see how strong their faith was really helped deepen mine, so that when I did go through some really, really tough times, I think we all do, you know, with family, with children, with sickness, with death, car accidents, you know, just any number, all of those have happened to me.
And I think even too, just the seasons of life. There may not be anything going on that's crazy, but then there may be nothing going on, which can be sort of dull too. You kind of get to that season where you're going, nothing's happening. So why am I not hearing from God? Why is nothing happening? And I think what's so fascinating about prayer groups and what's so fascinating about your characters is that they do exemplify sort of all the places that we've been. And there's a trust level that comes when you're meeting with women. You know, it becomes a safe haven to share
and I
those.
wanted to share that with people. What my prayer group had meant to me, I wanted to share that with other women and just share our experiences, but in a fictional way. And what has really surprised me is the number of readers who write and just say, oh, I wish I had a prayer group like that, you know. You know, I go to church and we have friends, you know, but I don't really have anyone, you know. And there's such a hunger there. So
I think, well, to connect too, because it takes, you know, it takes a lot of time to sort of, you know, cultivate the friendships. You know, you don't just come to a prayer group and all of a sudden everyone just dumps all their intimate parts of their lives and all of a sudden, you know, and there are a few people that actually do that, but as a whole, you know, it's not something, it's built up over time, and that trust, it takes a lot of investment into a prayer group for people, you know, for your friends and for that prayer group to mature into what it can be.
And that's what I've loved about your novels, is that you can really follow these women from that hesitant beginning, and they're not sure how to trust each other with those intimate parts of their life, and following them, watching them, how they grow and change. It is so inspiring, and I want you to tell me a little bit about, what do you hear from readers as they follow this journey and as they've been on their own journey? What has the response been?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of characters here, and so in a way there's somebody for everybody to identify with in one way or another. I have been really surprised at the large number of people who identify with the main character, who is your Midwestern, white bread, good girl Christian, you know, and yet, like me, she, you know, she had kind of a shallow faith, and she would put on all the, you know,
you know, all the right things to say, you know, no one's going to ask you any deep questions, so.
and then in her mind, she's saying, oh my goodness, I wish you'd stop talking, or I am so mad at my husband. I mean, you know, but it's written first person, and so the reader gets to identify with all the you know, that's going on. And I think it brought it out for people, you know, they need to bring more integrity into their thought life and into their attitudes, and not just the image that they're portraying.
Well, and I think more of that transparency as well, because she's, you know, that character is so used to being what she's supposed to be. That, and I think that's what a lot of women do resonate with, because a lot of women go through life thinking this was what I was supposed to do. If they've been raised in the church, this is how I'm supposed to act, this is how I'm supposed to respond in a crisis, this is how I'm supposed to respond when my husband says something I don't like. And so they don't really shape their own identity.
Not only that, but when they do sin, and it's the good girl sins, you know, it's prejudice, it's anger, it's frustration, it's, you know, the kind of things that you can justify, and you push those down, and you don't own them, because you're supposed to be this good girl Christian, you know. And so, like me, Jody had to experience this crisis of faith where she had to own that I'm just a sinner saved by grace, you know. And it was some of these other characters, some who didn't know all the churchy language and everything, you know, who said, you know, what does that mean? You know, you know,
we don't understand you. What language are you speaking?
Saved by grace.
And so she had to think, what does that mean? You know, and so it was really some of the other people who didn't have the kind of background and depth of knowledge of God, supposedly, that she did, who really taught her about faith, you know, and which brings up the reality of 1 Corinthians 12, which is that the different parts of the body need each other. And that's what I'm learning from this whole series, is that truth.
Well, and it keeps it real. I mean, women, if there's a certain level of accountability then it keeps it real. If you've shared something that's going on in your life, chances are that prayer group or those friends close to you are going to continue to ask how things are going with that. And I think that's, you know, for women, that's so important, you know, not only, that's what builds the friendship, you know, and really builds and kind of has the glue so that you can get through those hard times. But it really is, you know, sort of working through all of those issues. But again, I think it's the transparency and, like you said, being real. A lot of people, you know, just go through life doing the things that they think they've been taught, not understanding why they do them. And
well, the third book, you know, I mean, this group has been together. You know, I move it through several. You know, the first 3 books take 1 year, and the third book is called The Yada Yada Prayer Group Gets Real. I mean, you know, it's taking that long for them to really peel back the layers and own the ugly stuff underneath.
Right, and all the cattiness. We're actually going to take a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, stay with us. We're going to be visiting with Neta Jackson with the Yada Yada Prayer Club, or group. I have to clarify that. Yada Yada Prayer Group. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, welcome back to Deeper Living. Our guest today is Neta Jackson, author of the Yada Yada Prayer Group series. And Neta, a lot of our viewers have just fallen in love with the women in this series. And for some of our newer viewers who may not have delved into these books, give me an overview of some of the main characters. Who's the most controversial? Who do you get the most mail about?
Well, it's interesting. Some of the people who are most unlike probably my readers tend to be some of the favorite because they are so honest and they're so real. Like Florida. She's an ex-drug addict when we first meet her, and she's trying to put her life back together, and she is no nonsense, cut to the chase, you know, in your face, you know, when she hints any kind of hypocrisy, you know, in the first book, you know, something happens to Jody and she can't even forgive herself, and she says, you know, what makes you so special? You know, that God can't forgive you. He forgave me, you know, and you know, I mean, it's just a kind of a pity party. And Florida is, you know, is African American, and she's had a hard life. But then we have other African American characters like Avis, who is educated. She's a high school principal. You know, we're not trying to stereotype anybody in any one culture, and so we have a variety of people in each culture.
Well, and I think that's such a reflection of today's society. I mean, it is an interracial society. We all have our friends that come from different walks of life, and I'm glad that you sort of pulled that in and at least represented that in the book, because it's very real life. You know, there isn't, you know, the all-white girl, you know. I'm sure there is, but at the same time, though, to pull in the different walks of life, just like Florida, they're not all perfect. You know, it's not this perfect.
And like Avis really knows the scriptures, and she becomes a mentor, really, to the whole rest of the group. And then there's Stu, who is a social worker, and she's always trying to fix everybody, and she's always perfect, and she does everything. And Jody really hates her, you know, because Jody thinks of herself that way, but Stu always does everything better. And then there's Yo-Yo, who's trying to raise her stepbrother. She's only like 22 herself, but her mother's a drug addict, and so she's taken over. She ended up in prison, you know, because she forged a check trying to clothe her brothers to get in school, you know. And so there's just some of this reality, and this Jewish Christian sister brought her to this conference where they all met. They didn't really know each other.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk about that a little bit, because you have all these women from different walks of life.
How did they ever get together?
It's not like they just all of a sudden met each other and went, hey, here we go.
No, they went to a women's conference in Chicago, and they got thrown into a prayer group. You know, if you had number 26 in the top of your little folder, you know, you were in this prayer group, and they sit and they look at each other, and, you know, Jody's thinking, I have nothing in common.
You've got to be kidding me.
But then something happens during that weekend, and they start to pray for one another, and they realize they can't walk away from the conference. You know, Dolores, she's Latino, she's Mexican American, and her son gets caught in cross-gang fire. And a lot of readers think, that can't happen to me. But, you know, there have been 32 children in Chicago this year alone who've been shot accidentally by gang, you know, innocent kids. So this is reality for a lot of parents, you know, and they're frightened. This happens to her. Her son does live, but the group realizes, I can't walk away from this group and pretend like this weekend never happened.
And it didn't impact them because they get emotionally involved into
and
this
so they
group.
agree to come together and meet. And then we have some international too. We have Noni Amiko, who's from South Africa and keeps wanting to go back, but she's married to an American professor at Northwestern University. Does he want to go to South Africa? No. And so there's this tension for them all through the whole series about, you know, where's their family going to live. So
well, you've got a group of really diverse women, and they're coming from different points, different walks of life to encounter God in a fresh way. As we follow them through this series, what one incident either inspired your readers the most or most upset your readers?
Oh, wow.
What storylines have they really reacted to that caught them off guard?
Well, boy, that's hard to answer because, you know, there's 6 books so far in the series, and a lot has happened.
Well, like,
and it's different.
I was going to say, for a character to do something unexpected that maybe, like you said, catches the reader off guard. They expected the character to do this, and you sort of blindsided him with an unexpected.
Yeah, it's different for the different characters, you know. This is not a major one, but for one of my characters, it was Florida, you know, who's trying to get her life back together again after losing her kids when she was on drugs. But she found God, and she found Jesus, and she's really working at getting it back. Well, she lost one of her children, got lost in the welfare, in the foster care system, and they can't find her. And so
it's like every mother's nightmare.
They finally find her, and of course now she's in foster care, and she's trying to get her back. Well, unknown to the group and to her, this Jewish Christian woman couldn't have kids of her own. She had a foster daughter. That happened to her, that the daughter that she'd been raising for 5 years got taken away from her by the real mother. And so there's all of a sudden this conflict from both sides of the story.
You have a convergence of both of the emotions coming
And then
together.
I get letters from people who have had foster children or who gave a baby up, you know. So it's almost little things like that that will touch, you know, not all the readers, but you know, a segment. And because it's story, you know, I'm not writing a handbook on prayer groups or anything like that. This is a journey that they're on. People can say, oh, you know, gee, you know, I'm there too, you know, and it's so good to know that other people are struggling with that problem and that we're not all perfect.
Well, and we've had, you know, I think especially with our fiction authors, I think one of the things that, and Ginger, you're an author as well, but one of the things that, you know, I think is so great about fiction is that you guys can weave in the storyline, the real life stories that can connect to people, but without in a preachy way. You know, their life can be going through the same trial or same turmoil. Their outcome can have the right outcome, but you can share that story in a way in fiction that you can't normally just, you know, you can put antidotes in nonfiction and maybe examples of something, but when you're writing about a character, and I'm a pretty voracious reader of fiction, and I find myself really getting into the lives of these people. And you walk away from the book, I mean, not all of them, but many of them, and I think with your characters, you walk away from the book really feeling like you've got to know these women, that they were a part of your life.
I have readers writing to me and saying, the characters became so real. I found myself
Should I still be praying for her?
I'm praying for them, you know, what happened to such and such, you know. And actually that happened to me. I mean, I was so into these characters that I found myself one morning, you know, starting to pray for Florida.
Your husband comes out, starts going, who are you today?
But that's the power of fiction. You know, a lot of people, I mean, there are people who say, I don't read fiction because I don't want to read anything that's not true. There's so much truth in stories. And you do it with fear and trembling because, like a teacher, you know, you are putting things in your books. it's got to be based on the Word of God.
That's
you
right.
know? And it's got to bring people closer to Jesus, closer to God, or you'll be held accountable. I mean, that's what I think. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a certain, obviously a certain level of responsibility, because if it's not scripturally sound and you're writing these characters, like you said, you will be held accountable in essence, because fiction does allow for that. It has a lot more influence. I mean, you can look at some of the best sellers, and then they get made into movies, and then all these things, and it carries it because so many people identified with who was in the book. We're going to take a short break, but I want to talk a little bit when we come back, because I think that's been what the success of these books has been, is that you haven't showed these perfect Christian women, that just because you've made that step to be a Christian, and with the new Christians in this book, as well as those that have been seasoned, their lives are still flawed. They're not perfect, and they don't respond the Christian way all the time. With that,
in fact, Jesus had his harshest words for the perfect religious people. You know, self-righteousness is really a stumbling block for a lot of us.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to have our final segment visiting with Neta Jackson, so stay with us.
Award-winning designer Deborah Bordeaux brings you her For You Designs collection, made in sterling silver with crystal and semi-precious gems. Each item comes uniquely gift-packed with an exclusive poem inspired by the Word of God. This collection is themed by life events: friendship, love, praise, remembrance, and even salvation. The perfect reminder of God's promises for yourself or for a cherished friend or family member. With the For You Designs collection, you will never be at a loss for words.
Hi, welcome back to Deeper Living. We've been talking today with Neta Jackson, author of the best-selling Yada Yada Prayer Group series. And now, Neta, I know we're almost to the end of the road with the series. You're going to release the final installment this fall. But I have to ask you, what has been the legacy of this series? What have you seen in readers' lives?
Well, I truly think that the real legacy of this series, and this took me so by surprise, but I'm just so grateful, because this is really my first foray into adult fiction. You know, I've been writing children's fiction for a long time with my husband, Dave. But I think the legacy, if there is such a thing for a series, would be all the hundreds of prayer groups that have started all across the country because of this series of novels, which really surprised me. But there was a hunger, and people said, "Oh, we've got this group of women, and we'd really like to start a prayer group, and can we call it Yada Yada?" Which is really funny, because my own prayer group doesn't call itself Yada Yada. We try to keep a degree of difference between the fictional group and the real group, you know. But there are all these Yada Yada prayer groups all over the country, and I'm so grateful, because for a writer, there couldn't be anything greater than to know that there are women coming together to pray, to cry, to laugh, to support one another, because that is what the body of Christ is all about. 1 Corinthians 12 has just become my life. I was going to say my life verse, but it's not real comforting, because it keeps saying that we need each other, and we don't really act like we need each other that much. And so it does take some intentionality to reach across those cultural barriers, those age and life situation barriers, and to realize that we not only just pat them on the head and say, well, you know, I know you're a Christian too, but you have something to give to me, and I have something to give to you. And so it's been a gift to me from God, and I know they pray for me, and I pray for them. So.
Well, fantastic.
Well, that is it's such a compliment, I think, as a writer, because you don't expect that sort of reaction.
That's a real impact with your fiction.
And it's the powerful. Inspiration behind women taking away that we can do this. This is and it's not like a book club. This is something where women are saying, I need to be inspired. I need to have that sort of bond with another friend, and really need to just take that chance.
And what's happened is that there have been book clubs that start out, the book club, reading my book, and they end up being a prayer group.
That is fantastic.
And I visited some of those, and that's been That's been fun too.
Well,
you think it's a book club.
Yeah. The final book is coming out, and you've
Yes.
got prayer groups all over the country that are going to be continuing on. What's that like as a writer, to live with these characters for so long and then just have to let them go?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's been a real journey for me. I feel like I've just invited people to join me on the journey with these characters.
Right.
I thought it was just going to be this one book.
Yeah.
But you know, you can't put 12 feisty women in one book and expect to
Right.
expect them to stay there.
To have a perfect ending.
And so now book 7, the Yada Yada prayer group gets decked out.
Decked out. I love this. We actually just have a little tiny mock-up. The book comes out in October.
In October.
And so this is just sort of a little mock-up. I'm not sure if we can get a little close-up of that.
It's a gorgeous cover.
It's just, let's see if I can straighten that out. But I love that you've got them in their heels, and now they're getting decked out. Give us a sneak preview of this book.
That's right.
Well, one of their characters, there's actually a jump in time between book 6 and book 7 because book 6 was supposed to be the end. So in a way, they're having a reunion around the holidays, and Noni is coming back from South Africa, and they're going to have a reunion, and they have all these plans to get decked out, but God has other plans. And they end up with a surprise wedding at a homeless shelter for one of the one of the characters that ends up working there. And I think God shows them a different view of what getting decked out means in terms of how we clothe ourselves with compassion and mercy and kindness. So they have all these plans for partying.
Yeah, I was going to say holiday, gala
and there's
clothing.
nothing wrong with that. But along the way, they realize what it really means to get decked out with the spiritual things that really clothe us in a godly way.
Right, and that celebration of what it really should be about during that season as well.
Now, a few of these characters, though, you're not letting them go entirely, are you? You have to give us the scoop.
No,
the inside scoop.
I have a lot of sad readers who say, "Oh no, you can't end it. You know, I wanted to grow old with these people," which I suppose would be possible. But actually, I'm going to be starting a new series. Don't have a name for it yet, but some of the characters, some of the secondary characters, are going to move into a new series. It's still going to be a Chicago story, and I'm developing it now. I'm excited about it. So stay tuned.
Wonderful.
Well, that's fantastic.
It's been great.
Well, this is, this series has impacted so many lives, and I know it's blessed you as a writer.
Including me, yes.
That's right, and it's blessed us just to have you on the show today. I know our
so
viewers
wonderful.
are just going to fall in love with you like we have.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you for watching us here at Deeper Living, and continue to join us here daily when we bring you the latest in arts and entertainment, and authors like Neta Jackson, who are continuing to touch our lives through fictional characters that resonate with who we are as women and in our lives and the struggles we go through. And it's so exciting for us to be able to showcase the awesome power of God and the influence that He has just in everyday people. So you can get all of Neta Jackson's books on our website at www.deeperliving.com, as well as her latest book, The Yada Yada Prayer Group Gets Decked Out. So thank you, and we'll see you later.